Thanks for coming to talk with us, Vlad.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I think, as Anya mentioned, you have sort of an unusual profile for RingCentral in that you were bootstrapped for a very long time and have now kind of transitioned into being a venture-funded company through several rounds. So I'd love to talk with you about that. But before we get to that, maybe can you give us sort of a, for the benefit of the audience, if there's anybody in the room who hasn't heard yet, what does RingCentral do and what's the business?
Yeah, if you haven't heard of RingCentral, you guys should get around more often because it's hard to miss these days. But what about RingCentral? So RingCentral is a cloud-based solution to business communications. Basically what we do is we take business phone systems, PBXs, and we do away with them. So we put them into the cloud. We allow companies to completely essentially outsource this entire infrastructure. And it works great from several perspectives. One of the sort of the easiest way to understand is as working habits change and as companies become more and more distributed, a traditional hardware-based solution is sort of basically by definition limited to an individual office environment. Mm-hmm. And
you're talking about the boxes that sort of sit in the closet.
Yeah. We're talking about a box, a Cisco via ShoreTel type of a box. Okay? Yeah. And a box, it's a box, right? It works fine within a room, within an office. But if you have multiple locations, then a single box usually will not, solve that issue. And most companies at this point in time are dealing with distributed workforces, with distributed offices. So there is a huge sort of pool for a solution which would tie all of these different locations together under a single umbrella. Okay, and that's what RingCentral does.
Is this a VoIP solution then? So these are VoIP phones, or
it includes VoIP. It is not strictly VoIP, so we'll work with traditional phones. We'll interface to PSTN. But if you're looking at our soft phone clients, or Windows or web clients, or clients meaning applications, or the actual IP phones that we ship, then it would be VoIP. But we don't consider ourselves to be, a VoIP provider. We don't, the value behind RingCentral is not VoIP per se. It's not the transport. It's not that we're saving people on long distance. I mean, we are, but it's not, it's not really the reason to buy RingCentral. The reason to buy RingCentral is to solve your problem of multiple locations, as well as the fact that most people now have smartphones. And again, traditional PBXs just don't interface well to those, and we do.
Right. And you support texting over these lines now too, correct?
Yes. As of a few months ago, we were the first business enhanced voice provider to actually introduce texting. So that's been a good success for us.
Okay, that's a novel concept, texting to a business number, I think.
Well, it's kind of cool. So, I'm sure most people here, and certainly myself, so travel a lot. Much of it is international, and I used to have to give 2 phone numbers. My whatever local number I would have, if somebody needed to text me, and then my RingCentral number, which is my main number. So now that's been addressed.
Okay. Now, you first started work on the company in 1999. Is that correct? I mean, you had other companies before, right? But so,
yes.
Explain the genesis of the idea and kind of how you got started.
Well, so we'll go to ancient history, I guess, at this point. So my first company, RingZero Systems, we did that sort of in the mid-90s. And RingZero was one of the first voice applications on the PC. So why voice? PCs were kind of getting more and more endowed with multimedia capabilities. We were there at the right time, right place. We're very early had early ties with hardware manufacturers, actually, who were adding voice capabilities to the PC. There was a lack of applications at the time, so there was an opportunity. So we ended up doing a software application, which was actually called RingCentral, believe it or not. But it was a software package, which was, if people here are familiar with Asterisk, for example, kind of like what Asterisk is today. So it's a software-based PBX. But we never open sourced it. Instead, we ended up bundling it with a number of name brand PC manufacturers. We shipped literally tens of millions of units through this PC OEM channel.
Okay, so you could get a call on your PC.
So you could get a call on your PC and place a call and actually run an entire small business phone system on your PC. And that company did fairly well, and we ended up selling it to Motorola. And that's what gave genesis to RingCentral as we know it today, because what we knew was that there was tremendous demand for sort of non-traditional business communications. That market was, we didn't know exactly how big that market was at the time, but we thought it was, we knew that there were tens of millions of people who already, were using RingCentral software at the time. And what they wanted to do for the second go around is address that same market, which is, broadly speaking, the SMB segment, but do that with a cloud-based solution. So back in those days, people used to not talk about cloud, so this was...
Yeah, I was going to say, I barely heard the term cloud in the late 90s. I think it was sort of a technical term used by some internet architecture people, but it wasn't widely used as a marketing term, right?
Fair. So I was thinking more in terms of internet-based, subscription-based services, which is what we now call the cloud.
Exactly. Now, the landscape has changed a lot since then, right? I don't think I've seen one of those phone, hardware, PBXs in a closet in a long time. Many people have already transitioned to using smartphones as their business number. Have you had to kind of adjust, or how have you dealt with the shift? I mean, from '99 to now, or from the late '90s until now, that there have been a lot of kind of technological waves of change in that time, not least of which is the smartphone, rise of smartphones.
Definitely, yeah. So the reason you don't see those PBXs is that they actually do sit in those closets, and people usually don't, go into closets, right?
Okay, so they're still out there.
Look, it's a multi-billion-dollar market in traditional PBXs. Vast majority of businesses today, of all sizes, do use a PBX. More than half of US workforce, so we're talking many tens of millions of people in the workforce. Overall workforce is over 100 million. So more than half of that are people who have access to a traditional PBX in their work environment. So it's very much a live opportunity today.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a market that's both large and ripe for disruption.
Exactly right. Now, when we were starting, if anything, we were early, and we sort of saw the possibility of the smartphone. Believe it or not, back in those days, back in the late 90s, we had one of the first applications, if people remember here, Nextel WAP-enabled devices, which was very early attempts to sort of put some intelligence into the phone.
Yeah.
And we just stuck with it. But what we're seeing now is a lot more sort of acceptance and pull, and people are way more comfortable with the cloud.
Yeah.
Thanks to Salesforce.com and Workday and a bunch of companies like that. And of course, everyone is using a smartphone, and there is just quite a lot you can do by combining mobility with the cloud, which is where we're at.
Okay. That you raise a really interesting point, which is that I think mobility and cloud are very much intertwined. They're kind of the opposite. One enables the other, right? And one of the big concerns that many IT managers have at large and smaller companies is this kind of trend towards bring your own device, right? I'm going to use my iPhone or my favorite Android phone, and I want to be able to do business on that, and the IT manager can't dictate necessarily to the extent that they used to be able to. So how does that kind of larger BYOD trend play into your business, or how do you capitalize on that?
Well, it's really good for us, right? So what we do is we basically enable businesses and people, because businesses are comprised of people, obviously. So we enable people to do business in the way and to communicate in the way that's most convenient for them. It is a clear fact that smartphones are here to stay. Penetration of smartphones into businesses is on the rise. Vast majority of businesses today already allow iPhones and Android, which are basically consumer-grade devices, but they are now generally allowed into the corporate infrastructure. It obviously makes a lot of sense for a company to allow people to bring their own devices as opposed to having paid for those devices, for $500, whatever it is per person, right? So that adds up. And the thing is, when people bring their own device, so people talk about BYOD, but another very similar megatrend is dual identity, okay, which goes along with it. And what's dual identity? When you do have your own device, it wants to take on two identities: one, your personal one, and one for business. And that's exactly where RingCentral comes in. Is we actually have an app on iPhone and Android, which allows you to do exactly that. So, for example, when you want to place a phone call and have your business phone number to be displayed as a caller ID, so we allow you to do that. That's just one little sort of example of what we do.
Yeah. So it seems like you might compete to a certain extent with Google Voice, which I use sort of on an individual basis. It's not a corporate thing, but it might do some of the same things.
So we actually don't. So this question used to come up a lot. Frankly, less so now. So we don't. So Google Voice is sort of prosumer, which is professional consumer-based service. The easiest way to look at it is you cannot and never could run a multi-person business on Google Voice.
So you can't manage it, right?
Well, it's a single personware. It's not groupware, okay?
Right.
And RingCentral has always been about making work groups work together.
Okay.
And especially lately, we've been really seeing quite a bit of demand and business in larger businesses. And when we talk about SMBs, that's a fairly wide segment. So that's anywhere from 1 to say 500 people.
Okay.
And we're seeing quite a bit of interest, and we're also equally interested in moving closer to the 500 line. And that is just not Google Voice.
So who are you competing with in that market then?
Yeah, well, so that's a great question. It's big scheme of things, big picture is hardware boxes.
Yep.
Again, your Cisco's, Avayas, we're replacing, a fair number of Nortels they are getting, which is now part of Avaya, as they go through their life cycle. So that's really the bigger competitor out there. ShoreTel, kind of, smaller company. But look, in a very small business, people kind of will say what you say. Well, I'll just use use my cell phone, and that's fine. But if you think about it again, if you have a group of people and you don't have different people publish their individual Gmail addresses, right? You have your company, URL, company domain. Same thing with the phone number. So that is the lower end of the market. Higher end of the market, again, lots of hardware competitors. Telcos are kind of funny. So people sometimes have a tendency to call a phone company and go, well, I need a phone system solution. And telcos traditionally would sell you, a hardware or a reference cell, a hardware box. So our way there is we actually entered into an agreement with AT&T. So AT&T is a good partner of ours at this point and a strong reseller. And nowadays, if you want to get a business phone solution from AT&T, you will actually, it's just that
Powered by
you'll get this power. Well, it's actually brought by AT&T. It's called RingCentral Office at Hand from AT&T.
Okay, so it has your branding. Okay.
So it's RingCentral branded, yeah.
So you bootstrapped this company for a long time, right? What,
Yeah.
I'm sort of interested in that period of time and how you kept the momentum going without outside investment, and at what point you decided to take on investment and why.
Yeah. That's a really good question.
It's sort of a complicated one, I guess.
It's a complicated one. Yeah, look, so I think the shortest answer I can give is I took outside investment once I realized that this opportunity was, very, very real, very, very big. And, we had a company, we had revenues, and we could probably turn it to profitability and all of that. But, it'd be another small company. And I just sensed that there was an opportunity to build something very, very large, very meaningful. And for that, you need partners. And partners is much more than just the funding itself. It's much more than just cash.
Did you resist taking investment at first, or was it just not even really in the question? Because there was a period of time where you weren't taking investment, right?
Correct. Well, so there were a couple of things that were at play there. So number one is I wanted to make sure that, so I'm a fairly conservative guy, in spite of what you'll hear out there. So I actually wanted to make sure that the technology worked, number one, and really wanted to have proof of concept. Number two is I wanted to not only have the technology work, but I wanted to see that there is traction with customers, that we're able to acquire customers, that we're able to acquire them profitably. That's not to say that the company itself is profitable, but every individual customer, I always thought we should not be subsidizing our own customer base.
Right.
Right. So I wanted to make sure that is, and very, very importantly, I wanted to see that once those customers are onboarded, then they don't all, leave in 2 months. Mm-hmm. So we needed to make sure that churn was somewhere. So there were sort of some of the basics, some of the basic criteria that I needed to be addressed from my side. Secondly, when you talk about outside investment, so that wasn't my background. I wasn't coming from a venture-backed background, mm-hmm. and kind of, used to more sort of, initially was sort of used to more of a sole proprietorship type model, or maybe a small partnership.
That's what RingZero was not venture-backed.
And that's what RingZero was.
Okay.
RingZero was never funded, right? So RingZero was bootstrapped. But kind of what I basically ended up deciding for myself, and different people can take different approaches, I guess, is I kind of felt that, well, if this opportunity is really as big and as world-class as I think it is, then it really should attract sort of world-class investors and basically people I would know of. And I'm not a huge, student of the industry, was not at the time anyway. So I kind of figured, well, if I knew the name, then maybe they're big enough, And I was basically more or less holding out until Sequoia called. So Sequoia happened to have known at the time. So
yeah, okay. Yeah. And you took your first outside investment starting when?
Very late 2006.
Very late 2006.
Yeah,
Okay.
November of December 2006. Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned you needed partners to grow. Has this I've read other descriptions of taking venture capital as kind of like adding rocket fuel to your business. Was there an immediate effect? Was there, was that a big inflection point in your business?
It's a great analogy because you take a rocket, you put fuel on it, and usually it blows up. So, no, of course, it's immediate change, but it takes time for all sides to adjust. But it's an immediate stamp of approval. people do start taking you substantially differently and more seriously. But it's really more about longer term effects anyway. And because yes, you get funding, but again, it's more than funding. So you get access to talent that you otherwise would not have, have to. And it takes time to get those people in and get them comfortable and have them start producing for you. So it's not that it's an immediate change, as visible from the outside world, other than the fact of funding itself, but the fact that you are now able to build a substantially different caliber team. And, in our case, it took a few years, but meaning after funding.
Yes.
But, it's certainly bearing fruit now.
How big is the company now?
Right. So, we don't disclose actual numbers, but, it's sizable. So customer base is, and so these are sort of paying business accounts. Customer base is is north of 100,000 businesses. Revenues are, north of 100 million. And
okay. And how many employees, roughly? Hundreds?
Hundreds. Okay. Hundreds and many more hundreds contractors. Okay.
So how you have a fairly large company now. It's fairly mature. You've been, gone through a long bootstrap phase and now a fairly long funded phase. How do you keep the, entrepreneurial excitement and enthusiasm for what you're building going over that period of time? Do you have advice for somebody else who may, in my jobs, I tend to get bored around 3 or 4 years. I feel like I've accomplished a lot and I'm ready for the next challenge. So but to do something like this, you have to get people who are engaged for the long haul, it seems like.
Well, first we tend to look for people and sort of filter people based on the fact that they do have this entrepreneurial streak in them. So, people that we get, we hope sort of like being in the startup environment, and we don't have to work very hard on convincing them, to continue doing what they like, which is work for a smaller, rapidly growing company. Now, clearly you have people who only want to do their own thing, and who want to join a 5-person startup, and we're not that anymore. Right. But those are few and far between, and what we find is, lots and lots of people are happy to be in an environment where they can effect change. So maybe the key word here is change, so empower them to contribute in a way where they can actually see, actual results of their work and see it in, somewhat close to real time, and that keeps it going. And the company is growing rapidly. We are fairly forthright as far as, sharing, company's performance with the employee base. I'm generally available sort of to answer questions ad hoc, whatever. All of our walls are either non-existent or transparent glass, so people can see what other people are doing, and all of that, seems to be working. But most importantly, it's a growth, because whatever you say, whatever you do, whatever position you take, if the company is not growing, if customers are not buying, then it's not going to,
Right.
It's not going to work.
Right. We could certainly take audience questions. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to ask Vlad a question, raise your hand. Either now or in the next few minutes, and if we see you, I'll point you out. Yeah, we have a question right there. And it looks like, somebody has a microphone who's coming your way.
I'm coming from Europe. I'm very interested what you mentioned about dual numbers, because in Europe, it's quite important. Can you tell me if you can make a phone call and receive numbers from business and say personal, and maybe there's like a different area codes? Is it possible with your solution?
Right. So with RingCentral, you can assign or associate any number of phone numbers from all the different areas with your RingCentral account, and these phone numbers can be attached to the company itself, or to a department within the company, or to an individual within the department. So as far as what types of numbers there are, so today we provide numbers all across the US, all of the different area codes. Canada, and we actually have a separate service, but it's not integrated into the main one yet, in the UK. As far as worldwide numbers, it's something that's on our roadmap, but it's not currently what we do. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, whenever a phone number is associated with your account, when people call you on that number, it will be passed on to you wherever you are, and when you dial out through our app, that number will be displayed.
I have a question. So, what is the most compelling reason people are buying your solution? There are tons of companies over there, and so why do you think, what's the most important reason they're doing this, and why investors put so much money in your company and sort of top funds, not just some investors, right? So what was so attractive to them?
Well, I'll start with the second part. So I think that fundamentally the main reason that at least our type of investors go into a company is, to this day, I still believe it's really the market opportunity. It's total addressable market, which we believe is very, very large. It's a little bit hard to estimate, but it's, multi-billion-dollar market, no matter how you look at it. So there is enough headroom, yeah? Why they invested in us is we were early. We had a track record, at least with a software business. We had all of those proof points that I went through, so technology was pretty much working. Monetization was more or less worked out, that type of stuff. Now, as far as, and the team, so I don't know, different funds have different criteria, and, Dylan is covering, the venture scene here, so you'll have your own point on this perhaps, but I know that, for example, one of our funds was very upfront saying that, look, what we really like to do is we like to invest in serial entrepreneurship. Yeah, it's basically people who've done it before, even though at a smaller level, but somebody who has sort of shown the ability to get a company off the ground and, do something meaningful with it. Lastly, as far as there is lots of stuff out there, there is less out there than you'd think, okay? Because there is a number of companies, who do hardware, so that's the, that's the empire side of things, okay? So that's the competition. But if you're talking about sort of cloud-based services, there is a number of resellers, not that huge of a number, basically. And there are really only very few sort of core technology providers that, that do what we do. And of these, we're the largest, the fastest growing, the one who is most mobility-centric. So whatever we do at RingCentral, and this has been for many years, is first developed for the mobile device and then sort of reimagined in its sort of traditional desktop environment. This is exactly the opposite of the way that most developers still do business. And that shows. And then there is another point, and this is really important, at least in our business. So we are basically in the B2B space, right? And what a big part of our value add is not just the technology, and technology has to be there, and if there is no technology, then we got nothing. But it's everything that goes around it. It's our onboarding process. It's the fact that we'll actually, set up your, if you have a, 500-person company, and we have, lots of those customers, well, how do you configure your phone system to your cloud-based phone system to access all of these, to tie all of these locations and people and smartphones and all of these other devices together. So we'll do all of that for you. So that's a big differentiator for us.
Follow-on question, and this is mostly for entrepreneurs in the audience. So I was at the annual party of one of the top venture funds, and I met another investor there, partner of another fund, and we started talking, and he said, oh, I managed to get in and invest in RingCentral. And I was like, you managed to? So it was like he was kind of so happy that he got in. So besides what you were talking about the company, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs in terms of how to deal with venture funds and partners of the funds so that they kind of be excited and happy that they managed to get in and invest in your company?
Yeah, play hard to get.
You don't want to need the money, right?
What?
You don't want to be in a position of needing the money, right?
No, you don't, but you need to grow, and growth takes capital, and it's this dance. I don't know, not to get corny, but it's, when two people of opposite sexes get together, I guess there is a mutual need, but somehow you don't want to, you need to play it. But look, you need to be selective, right? You need to be selective on all sides, and it needs to be the right match, yeah? It's not just about money. It's chemistry. It's personalities. It's what else is in their portfolio. It's do they understand? Do they get our business? Are they there for the long term? Are they trying to make a quick buck and get out? We have our investors telling us now that they're long-term holders, and they've been with us for almost 7 years now, and they're still long-term holders, and we're getting very, very little pressure, for example, to offer them any type of liquidity. So I think that fundamentally those are the investors you want, who are not there for a quick buck, because then you have then you have divergent goals, and that's not a good thing. So you had a question.
Thank you. So over the course of time, there's probably been 2 or 3 circumstances where your customers did things that were surprising outside your expectations for how they used your products and technologies and such. Can you think of an example or 2 of something that a customer did with your stuff that you didn't expect that turned out to be really profitable for them and for you?
Wow, really good question. Yeah, look, so firstly, the way that people are really creative, and the way that they set up, and our system is pretty flexible. So you can do a lot with it. It's kind of like almost like a programming language. It's not a language, but you can do a lot. Yeah, people, some of sort of basic examples is, so we talk about companies, I talked about sort of this groupware and how groups of people are wanting to come across as a single company. So I was surprised to find out that the reverse situation holds. So you have a single individual who wants to come across as 5 different companies, all using one RingCentral account, okay? So that was kind of interesting, and literally, or many cases, again, this is with smaller businesses, where you would have a person answering one phone number as a CEO, and another one as head of sales, and another one as head of shipping, right? So we have those cases. There are some others, and it's not that we haven't foreseen them completely, but it wasn't it wasn't the tip of the spear for us. But sort of all of these disaster recovery situations, where people, and sometimes it's people, and sometimes it's even government agencies, using RingCentral as a backup solution in case of disaster. So we should talk about that a little bit, and maybe another reason why people go with a cloud-based solution is, so for example, when Superstorm Sandy hit, lots of businesses in New York literally went down, and got flooded out, and phone systems got flooded out, and NBA's Players Association phone system got flooded out, okay? So what, they signed up with RingCentral. So that was an interesting case. Yeah, so why would you do that? Well, because we have multiple data centers, and we were fortunate enough that our East Coast data center was actually not hit, but we never, we didn't know that ahead of time, so we ended up shifting all of our traffic to the West Coast, and kind of felt pretty safe during the situation. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Well, one of the things about your market is that I'm interested in is you focus on SMBs, right? Now, small businesses can be a very hard market to reach. And you may have great data that there's a multi-billion-dollar opportunity for phone systems for SMBs, but because it's so fragmented and SMBs have many different characteristics and many different needs, and there's no one place to reach them, how have you tackled that goal? How do you reach such a large but fragmentary market?
Yeah. So several ways. Initially, thank God for Google and the long tail, and the fact that with a very small advertising budget, you can start getting traction. But that's sort of a starter thing, right? So basically, once you start getting a user base, we try pretty hard to keep them happy and to have them be promoters of our service. And our number one channel of acquisition today is word of mouth. Even to this day, and we're running, billboards and radio and all of that stuff, and that's all great, and that generates awareness and, brand building and all of that. But in the end, net, what we want to do is we want to have our customers tell their customers and their friends and whatever that, here is something neat to try. It really works, but the product has to work as well.
Yes, my name is Leonid, and the question is, could you share your thoughts on why AT&T guys are not in the same business?
They're reselling RingCentral. Okay. So.
We have another question over, a couple more.
Hey Vlad, Igor Cherny.
Hi.
Question, when you got your outside money first, what changed in the company culture? That is very interesting question for obviously lots of entrepreneurs and for you as a CEO who got it first.
Yeah, well, many things changed. Yeah, but again, as I was saying, not immediately, But look, there's a number of Russian speakers here, I think. We started out as a small group of Russian engineers, to be direct about it, and which is probably not unlike many of the companies here. And what changed is we started attracting talent from other walks of life, people with major sort of demonstrable successes, in related fields. So all of these other people started coming in. We were fortunate enough to get some very key people from WebEx, Cisco WebEx, for example, who are still making major contributions. We got people from various sort of merchandising companies, sort of early e-commerce pioneers, people that frankly we didn't know before, that we were able to attract, once we had sort of the Sequoia and costless stamp of approval on the company.
Yes? Oh, where's the next question? Right there.
Okay, hi, my name is Margaret, and my question is like this. The privacy issue. Many phones in this country, right? Apparently. Yeah, you know what I want to ask, right? So how about the privacy? Are the phones confidential? Is government has any access to it?
Yeah, sure. So privacy. Yeah, so first of all, not to get too political, but my personal feeling is that there's still more privacy here than maybe in some other parts of the world. But as far as the phone system business is concerned, it is a regulated business. So there are very strict sort of laws and regulations that we have to abide by. And we do. And, whatever government, regulations are with respect to ability to get, to whatever data, we don't do any more or less than what is prescribed by the law.
Okay. We have a question in the middle here. There you go.
This seems like the quintessential leapfrog technology. And in that regards, I wonder what your strategy is in emerging markets, BRICS and otherwise. And as a follow-on to that, I suppose, what challenges have you faced in some of those areas of the world?
Yeah, so great question. Very timely from our perspective. Short answer is we haven't done that yet, so I don't know. As I mentioned, we're mostly a US-based business. We are in Canada, but that country seems to have emerged already. We are expanding internationally, but we'll start with Europe. As far as BRIC and beyond, uncharted waters. What we do know from initial research is that the SMB segment there generally is very, very strong, growing extremely rapidly. So there seems to be a lot of sort of built-in demand. But I'm sure there will be regulatory issues and pricing models will need to be sort of revisited and all of that. We just haven't done it yet.
All right, I have one more question, a little more personal about the entrepreneurial life. You have a family, right? You have kids?
I do.
Father's Day is coming up
Yep.
this weekend. How over the years have you balanced being a father with the sometimes, no doubt, very strenuous and time-consuming demands of creating a company and running a company?
Yeah, I think probably short answer is not as well as I should have, But no, so you have to, that's my answer, But, I do try to balance. I always did try to balance. And, you can't, I don't know, you can't earn every dollar in the world anyway, not that you should. I don't know, my own personal sort of approach to this has been to sort of just do what I do and, don't try to, lose a sense of humor about it and do show up at home from time to time and let them make their own choices, But, it kind of worked out. I mean, they understand that, there is maybe some positive correlation between, hard work and a certain degree of success, and, hopefully they'll make their own decisions as they get there.
Okay, good. Well, Vlad, thank you very much for your time here on stage, and thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you all.